President, earlier today, the minority leader came to the floor to be able to talk about multiple issues. During that conversation, he called me out by name in a rules proposal that I have in front of the Rules Committee this week, saying he vehemently disagrees with that rules proposal. And he mentioned even that he knows that I came here in 2014 and I should study the history of the Senate a little bit more before I bring up a rules proposal. Well, I would only tell you I have studied the history a little bit, and I'd like to be able to get a little bit of context around those comments. The rules proposal that the minority leader is opposing is the exact same rules proposal that he actually voted for in 2013 when he was on the Rules Committee, and then voted for again when it came to the floor of the Senate. This is not some radical proposal. Democrats in 2013 found it intolerable what was happening with the nomination process. And so at the beginning of 2013, they worked with Republicans and said, we need to be able to put a structure in place to be able to get nominations through, because a president should be able to have his staff put in place, and there shouldn't just be arbitrary slowdown through that process. Republicans came on board, even during a very contentious time, as Republicans did not agree with the policies of President Obama, and said we would agree. And with a vote of 78 total votes, 78 votes on the floor of the Senate, a rule change was made that was proposed by Senator Reid, supported by Senator Schumer, supported by Senator McConnell, to say that this is a rule change that would go into place. And it was a very simple rule. The rule was just for nominees. When nominees come to the floor, the minority can always ask for additional time to debate. But most of the time in the past, they have not. But they could. But the time that's given to that is 30 additional hours for debate. And the assumption is it's a controversial nominee where you need 30 additional hours of debate. That time was lowered in this 2013 rule to say for district court, just 2 hours of debate on the floor, because quite frankly, district court nominees had never been held up on a cloture vote. So 2 hours of extra time. They've already been through the committee time, they've already been approved, now they're coming to the floor, and if there was a request for additional time, they get an additional 2 hours on the floor. If there were any other nominee, they would get 8 hours of additional time, if they even asked for more time. But they would get 8 hours of additional time, except for Supreme Court, Circuit Court, and cabinet level. They would remain 30 hours. That was the agreement that was made and that we functioned under in 2013 and in 2014. Fast forward to today. Today, we have a historic new precedent that has been set for any president coming in. That was absolutely not done by Republicans in the past, and that was absolutely not done by Democrats in the past. But it is being done now. Right now, there are 67 judges pending and 139 executive nominees pending. 139. In just the past year and a few months, Democrats have requested 85 cloture votes. That is asking for an additional 30 hours of debate time. And they can say, well, these nominees need to be vetted. These are all nominees that have already gone through the committee process, have already waited in line. There's been a tremendous amount of vetting. Even if this was an additional vetting, an additional 30 hours of debate on the floor, from most of these nominees by far, there have been less than an hour of actual debate on the floor for these individuals. But 30 hours has been requested. It's not 30 hours of debate. In fact, just the past couple of weeks, we've had district court judges where they've had a demand for a cloture vote on them, and we had less than 15 minutes of additional debate time for those individuals on the floor, but 30 hours had to be allocated. But less than 15 minutes of actual debate on that person. This is not about vetting. That's a good line for the media. That's a good line for the base. This is about slowing down the Senate. This is about dragging the process through. Again, giving you a side-by-side, the minority leader said that this is about keeping intact the power of the minority. And the power of the minority needs to be maintained in the Senate. I totally agree. That's why I'm trying to work this through a normal rules process. The same rule that the minority leader supported on the Rules Committee in 2013, the same rule that he voted for on the floor. The only difference now is it's not Democrats in power, it's Republicans in power. Republicans joined Democrats in 2013 to be able to put this into place. But for some reason now that Republicans are in place, Democrats are saying this is an onerous rule that'll take away the power of the minority. The only real thing that's changed here, other than now it's Republicans in control, other than Democrats, is one other thing. That is the nuclear option. When Senator Reid and Senator Schumer put in place the nuclear option at the end of 2013, at that time, there were 20 judges pending and 56 executive nominations. But they unilaterally changed the rules of the Senate to be able to drop down nominations from 60 to 51 because they were so frustrated. There were 20 judges pending and 56 executive nominations. Can I remind you, right now, there are 67 judges pending and 139 executive nominations pending. So the minority was so frustrated when they were in the majority that they had to go nuclear and unilaterally change the rules in November of 2013, even after Republicans had joined them in January of 2013 to be able to change the cloture rules because there were 20 judges pending, but yet now there are 67 judges pending. At that time, there were 56, so they went nuclear on the executive nominations. Now there are 139. Listen, this is not an argument that I'm trying to make based on a partisan issue. I'm trying to go back to the agreement that was made in 2013 that was a bipartisan agreement, and to say that worked for that time period. Republicans and Democrats came around it, and it worked. We actually had a process that was in place. I'm asking to take that Democrat-written document and say, let's make that the rule from here on out, not just for this session, but from here on out, so that we would have consistency whether you have Republicans or Democrats in control. All I'm asking is for Democrats to vote again for the same thing they voted for in 2013 when they asked Republicans to join them, now for Democrats to join us, and to say, let's make this the clear rule for everyone. That's the history that I think needs to get into this conversation. Quite frankly, I'm not trying to ask for something radical. I'm trying to do a rules change the right way, the rules as they're written. Going through the Rules Committee, having a hearing, which we had in December, having a markup in the Rules Committee, bringing it to the floor of the Senate and actually have a rules change. If there's another proposal that we can have, I'm glad to be able to have that conversation. I'm not looking to make it contentious. I'm trying to actually solve a bad precedent. Because the precedent that's now been set by the minority party right now will be the new precedent when the next president comes. So the next time there's a Democrat president, I can assure you Republicans will say, well, we'll just do the same thing Democrats did to the Republican president, we'll do to the next Democrat president. And year after year, this toxic environment gets worse. The only way to dial the volume back is to actually fix the rules, to be able to make sure they stay fair for everyone. Again, this is not a partisan move for me. This is trying to get the Senate to actually function and work again. This rule change that was done in 2013, Senator Reid and Senator McConnell came to the floor of the Senate and had a colloquy. And in that colloquy, Senator Reid said, it's our expectation that this new process for considering nominations as set out in this order will not be the norm, that is, asking for additional time for every person, but that the two leaders will continue to work together to schedule votes on nominees in a timely manner by unanimous consent, except in extraordinary circumstances. That was Senator Reid's comment. But now, this has been invoked more than 80 times by the minority just this year. There's not been 80 extraordinary circumstances. Quite frankly, many of these individuals, we had additional time for cloture, and then they passed almost unanimously. They weren't controversial. It was about slowing down the Senate. Let's get this fixed. When the Senate is broken, and it is certainly broken in process right now, the senators can fix the Senate by fixing our own rules. That's what I'm encouraging our body to do. I do understand the history, though you're right. I wasn't here when the nuclear option was imposed, when Democrats did a historic change to the Senate rules unilaterally. I wasn't here then. Senator Schumer did support that and did make a radical change at that time. I have to read about that history. But I can tell you, we can fix our future, and not just for Republicans, but for the country, if we'll actually fix this rule change in the future. With that, Mr. President, I yield back.